But yeah, we just have an hour with you. It's not a super long time, but we thought it was worth taking just a little bit of time to recognize this output, to share a little bit about why this journey and what's come out of it. And for us, it's still very much part of a beginning of an issue. Got it? Of an issue that we think continues to be so important for many of us in the space, whichever side of the issue we sit on, whether we are people trying to figure out how to fund our innovation, or whether we're trying to figure out how to support the ecosystem, or whether we're just beneficiaries of it and we want to see things work. I think many of us always have concerns about how the work gets supported, how the work gets funded, how it gets to be more sustainable. And so thank you for joining us in this beginning. My name is Geshi Karuri Sabina. I am the organizer of the Civic Tech Innovation Network. I think I'll have to change that title because actually many of us are organizers of the Civic Tech Innovation Network. So I feel like I've been given a dummy title, but that is the title I hold. And I'm actually going to, without further ado, hoping that you're all feeling welcome, introduce the person who will first introduce the project, and that's Amy Mutua, who was the research assistant, but really also the kind of heartbeat of this project as we went through it. There were many times when my heart had stopped, but hers kept moving. And I think we were all very grateful for Amy's driving and helping just coordinate us all. Amy is a research assistant at the Tayarisha Center at the Wits School of Governance. And she also moonlights with the Civic Tech Innovation Network when she feels like. We were glad she did in the case of this project. And Amy, I'd just like to hand over to you just to share a little bit about what this project was about.
Thank you, Geshi. Thank you for welcoming us and for such a lovely introduction. I'm going to just explain a bit of the project, a bit of the background to this project. Basically, it's a product of highlights its financial sustainability and funding. So there's already been quite a few conversations, some on regional perspectives and the general funding landscape in Africa. And I think we'll put a few of those links in the chat, and you can go back and watch those conversations, read the reports. But basically, it became quite clear that funding and money, it's an issue that we all face. And so it's important to talk about it. It's important to create spaces where we can learn and unlearn from each other. And that's basically where the concept of this project came from, because we wanted to explore how can we actually sustain civic tech? How can we make sure that the work we're doing has some longevity? So we know that the space is heavily grant dependent. So we're looking at what are some of the alternatives, how can we extend beyond this, but also how can we strengthen the philanthropic relationship, and how can we strengthen relationships between funders and fundees. So that's what this new research really aimed to do, to explore financing issues, to explore strategies and models to create a more sustainable funding landscape for civic tech in Africa. So that was kind of our concept, and through the support of Civicus and the Charm project, we were able to make it happen. So I do want to acknowledge and thank Civicus and the Charm project. I think Shubikai Kopuya is on the call, and we'll hear from her a bit later. But yes, with their support, we were able to really put together a great team. Gabriela Rosano from Open Up, she was the lead researcher from this and our team helped us create an online platform to provide the same information in a more interactive and interesting way. I also have to acknowledge the CTIN team, so Geshi and Nati and Yasmin, they all put in so much work in this project to get us to where we are today. And then we also had a great production team. So it was very much a team effort. So that's a bit of the background. I don't think I should spend any more time on it. So I'll hand over to Gabriela and her team, and they'll take us through the project outputs.
Gabriella, who is called Amy Mutua today. You might want to rename yourself, dear.
I'm not sure I know how to do that. Oh, it's because Amy sent me the link because I couldn't find. I was like, I don't know where we are. I'll write it in cat in the. I have a presentation. Can you allow me to share screen?
You should be able to share.
Thanks so much. Hold on, let me just make sure things are closed. I'm pressing the wrong share button. Oh. Okay, let me try that again. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. Don't worry, it's not a long presentation because I think we'll have a lot more fun talking about the research. But how we'll work this is that I will quickly run over some of the research and give you the gist of it. And then I'll pass over to Dirk from my team at Open Up. And Dirk will give a little demonstration of some of the content on the new website, which is just seeking to more dynamically, introduce some of the research. So obviously, I'm Gabriella Rosano. I'm the director of Open Up. I've been involved in the civic technology sector since 2013 when we founded Open Up. But before them and during, have been involved in working with non-profit organizations and including, being director of other kind of non-profit entities and leading funding at other institutions as well. So this trying to get money to keep everybody working has been a part of my life for a very long time. Probably why I'm aging so quickly. So we thought, in thinking about the research, we really wanted to bring an African perspective on civic tech funding and financing landscape. So both reflecting on the actual landscape, but also really thinking about what it is that African civic tech needs and what are the contexts that African civic tech exists in. And so as part of that, there is a kind of strong emphasis on very practical advice and trying to, pull out very positive actions that can be taken in relation to this. So in terms of the methodology for the research, which is not the fun bit ever, it is largely qualitative research. We centered research ethics very centrally, as we always do. We have strong responsible data and ethics practices in my organization. And we brought this into the research as well. There were three main kinds of data collection: focus group interviews, long form interviews, and there was a draft survey. The survey is actually wasn't so much for the construction of these findings, but is a tool we've developed in order to allow us to regularly review elements of the environment after this research more regularly. We also looked at the Civic Tech Innovation Network's project database. And as part of this research, and really, I think, linked to a lot of the recommendations we make as well, I'd really encourage people to also look at the Civic Tech Innovation Network's new impact, their new work on interactive impact data for civic tech work, because I think that comes out as very, very important for thinking about funding and financing as well. So these are just some very high level findings. From the community findings, interesting to see how dominant non-profit structures are, but also how dominant donor reliance is in the environment. You know, I did interview and deal with other kinds of models, including like impact investment, social entrepreneurship, you know, those kinds of things, and they feature in the research. But those are really alternatives to the current models that are currently being used. When organizations, civic tech organizations in this region do revenue kind of work or project kind of work, it tends to be very service-based. And there is not a lot of productization compared to the kinds of social entrepreneurship structures you see in the States, in particular, or some European countries. So there's not too many examples of that you can find. Although this wasn't ever meant to be a definitive survey of what is happening, it's rather meant to be, you know, developing practical insights into what could help if you're looking into funding and financing civic tech in the region. In terms of what people are really calling for from the community, there, you know, was obviously a desire for unallocated grant funds. There was a strong desire for different kinds of forms of resourcing on funding and fundraising, and also quite a lot of interest in what alternative models there are for funding and financing, but also associating, which might impact funding. Sorry, my nose is running. So in terms of recommendations, the funding and financing should ideally, let me turn off my camera while I have an audience coming in and out. Sorry. In terms of financing and funding, it's very important. I mean, this sounds simplistic, but you know, I couldn't highlight it enough, is that funding and financing should be driven by a strategy. And that strategy should be much more directed by your organization's own impact strategy necessarily than the traditional kinds of SWOT analysis or environmental analyses that tend to focus on funding and fundraising as separate to the organizational strategy. To assist organizational implementation, a focus on risks and opportunities for evaluating the different kinds of funding sources is very helpful. And we brought that out into the research quite significantly, which I'll explain now. Practical resourcing should be a priority for capacity building, but also re-envisioning for organizations, re-envisioning what funding and resourcing is also instructive. So thinking a little bit more creatively about what is it, what are the resources outside of capital resources that you might need to further your work, and incorporating those ideas into your funding and financing strategy as well. So just in terms of how we constructed the research, we've done some background research, then we've highlighted key concepts, then we work on risks and opportunities. And so we created a table of, you know, different kinds of funding sources or different kinds of clients to really at a high level help you examine the different kinds of risks and opportunities that might lie with different kinds of funding sources. And, you know, that's kind of a typical organizational development strategy, but that's also, you know, based on a real recognition that, you know, every organization is different. Every organization has a different impact strategy. And so, you know, bearing in mind what the perfect combination of different kinds of funds will be for your organization needs to be developed both with insight into your organization, but also with insight into the typical risks and opportunities that might lie with different kinds of funds. We then do a bit of practical application of some of the research into what we call funding scenarios. And, you know, we look at a civic tech organization that relies on donor funding. We look at new civic tech organizations that might be in the startup phase. We look at donors who might be trying to look into the civic tech landscape. social entrepreneurs looking to scale product, and civil society organizations who may be looking for a civic technology partner, because of course that kind of partnership is very often a revenue stream for civic tech. And then we also put into the research actioning on that, on the different findings, practical actioning that might be of relevance. So those are the high level introductions to the research. I'll pass on now to Dirk, if you're ready, Dirk. So you can just lead everybody through the site.
Can you hear me? Yay, okay, good. I'm also going to share my screen. Let me do that. It'll probably help when I show something to share it. So the part of this was to obviously to try and come up with a website around an interactive version of the report, essentially. The report is great, and we do not want the website to in any way take away from the report, or it's not meant to be a replacement for the report. It is more sort of a supplement for the report. It's sort of the report light, I would say, and it's a way for people in the space to interact with the report, and perhaps some key takeaways from the report that we can also hopefully still expand on. So the website currently is sitting here at funding.civictech.africa, so a new little subdomain there. We have to thank the Seaton team for getting it up there today. It was great. And can I just ask, do you see these, all these screen, do you actually see the screen itself, or do you see these overlays as well? I'm always wondering about that. Just the screen. Okay, so here's the website. Okay, so this is what we've kind of taken. This is the report, but it's sort of a light, engageable way. So we've got the playbook starter here, and what really the report is about, but also what the website is about. And the idea is to get a bird's eye view of African civic tech, understanding the key risks, as Gabby also mentioned, and also the opportunities associated with that, and then also to see the different funding scenarios. We also have a little bit about civic tech in Africa, and then we go and we focus on this idea of the funding scenarios. And the idea would be that any civic tech organization or anyone in the space who want to get engaged in civic tech might find themselves here and be able to see themselves in one of these scenarios and find relevant information on that. And then, of course, we also direct people to understanding the risks, again, associated with different funding scenarios. And, of course, back to the report, which is ultimately the important thing here. So in the key concepts, this just looks at what civic tech is and our understanding for the purposes of the report and in general. And we look at a few of those things. And then the important thing is also the funding scenarios. So we've taken those 5 scenarios where we've got, for instance, being a scenario where, my internet's a bit slow there for a moment. I apologize. A civic tech organization which is predominantly donor reliant. Let me just quickly, and each scenario, just want to see here. Let me just, sorry, my internet's terribly slow at the moment. Oh, there we go. I'll just quickly reload that one. There we go. Donor reliant, and for each one we kind of break what this funding scenario organization that finds themselves as that could be on par with this scenario and what they should look at. So, and what would be a good strategy. So securing existing relationship, exploring new donors, diversifying revenue streams, and capacitating funding strategies. And then for each of these, and I think this is one of the nice things on the report and in the website, is tips that organizations can use that could be applicable for specific scenarios, or we also have a page where you can view all the tips on securing funding and sustainability. So these go through all of them. I'm a donor reliant, new civic technology entity, donor, social entrepreneur, civil society organization. And then I think what is quite nice is the risks. So in the report, there's the risks table. We have taken this risks table, kind of made it a little bit more interactive. So we look at different categories, and these categories would be the impact of a project, or payment, development processes, pricing, sustainability, reputational risk, etc. And then we say, look at potential funders and partners, and we see how they all kind of classify under those, how they would be under that criteria or under that category. So for instance, if we look at payment and administrative processes, we can see government is bureaucratic, sometimes complicated, corporate related to pricing, costing required, etc. So we can then filter all these and see how they all compare on different risk factors and risk categories. And the same way we can also go the other way around, and we can look at, for instance, just something like government and see how they are on all those categories. So impact, organizational development, reputational risk, etc., corporates, and so on. And so the idea is between this to try and be able to filter out potential and to find potential strategies for an organization. And then, as I mentioned, I think one of the nice takeaways on the site as well, and probably something that will hopefully be quite shareable, is these tips pages where organizations and people can just get new ideas in ways of looking at the tricky issue of funding. And that's it.
Thanks, Dirk.
Thank you so much for that, Gabby and Dirk. It's really nice to see this live and real. It's been a project for a few months now. It really does feel like ribbon cutting. I did ask a question on the chat. I can see a few people telling me who can and can't open the website. So we'll have a look into that. It might be about some corporate firewalls and this sort of thing, but it's just good to know actually if some people are struggling with that. And if you find other issues, let us know. Obviously, the intention, as Dirk said, is for it to be a complement and to be something we can build on over time. One of the areas that I know we spent a bit of time talking about during the project was actually those tables in terms of different funders and how we see things. I think it'll be interesting to see how people feedback on those comments and maybe add to those tables over time. So please see it as interactive. That's actually what we intended to be, because otherwise we could just give you the report and you could take it for gospel. But I think what we do want is to see the report as something that, in a way, plays two roles. And you'll see that we called it a playbook starter. And maybe that was for lack of finding a clearer thing to call it. But we do eventually want it to be a playbook. For now, we see it as something that serves two purposes. The one is to really be a starter guide for people who are in the space and are trying to figure out their funding. And so it should be useful to people at any point of sort of their innovation process as civic tech organizations. But we also want to see it as research, as exploratory, as beginning to strategize around these issues of sustainability. And we hope it does that. So coming into the next segment here, I hope everything is holding up okay here. We'd really like to invite a few people among us who've agreed to be on the panel. It's a bit unpanelly because we are hoping that it doesn't feel too traditional in the way we go about it. So it's not a Q&A with a group of people, but we'd like to invite among us Yvonne Eweka from CC Hub in Nigeria. You're welcome, Yvonne. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey. And we're glad you can open the link, so that's good. We'd like to invite Hamid. Are you here? I actually didn't see his face, but I think I see his name. Hamid Kayar from Chad Innovate.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear.
Hi, Hamid.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to invite Toyin Akinyi, who I'm not sure where she's joining us from this time. You'll have to tell us.
I'm in Nairobi at the moment.
In Nairobi, you see, so I would have said something wrong. So welcome to Toyin.
But I'm based in Nigeria. Yeah.
Thank you, one of our biggest supporters, and we really appreciate that. And we hope we'll hear from others of you in the room, but these couple of people, and of course, Gabby, who's still with us, of course, because in addition to being our brilliant lead researcher, she of course happens to also be a player on the field. So we thought it'd be good to retain you for the panel. And what we wanted to do is in a way, just get some reactions, and we've got some prompting questions, but I guess being an unpanel, you can talk about whatever you want. But the question I'd like to lead with, and maybe initially to Yvonne and Hamid in particular, is, you know, the Playbook Starter does make a few points about how one starts with their funding journey as they try to support their civic tech innovation work. And I just wondered, because you're both in organizations that have been on this journey, what would you advise, or what have you experienced to be important starting points in looking into your funding setup? And maybe I can start with you, Yvonne, just to see what you'd be willing to share from your practice in that regard. You're still on mute, so I can see your smile, but I can't hear you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I don't know if you mind repeating the question again.
It's a question about where do you start when you think about funding for your civic tech innovation work? What would be your reflection on where you have tended to start, or how a civic tech innovator to start on their funding journey?
Okay, so I would say for any civic tech organization thinking about funding, I think they need to get their vision right. Need to be clear about their vision and what they are setting out to do before thinking of funding. But in this part of the world, I discovered that a lot of people put funding first before the social good that they are planning to do. So for me, before thinking about funding, and from what we do at CCO, what we do is always look at what we set out to do, what impact do we want that to have on the people that we are in the project for, or the lives we intend to touch, then before we think of the different ways to source for fund. Funding is very important, but I think it comes along with the project, but it shouldn't be the heart of the project from what we do at CCO. So that's my experience about funding so far. So the impact is key. Your vision must be clear. You must get clarity on what you want to implement or what you want to fund before thinking of how to go about it. And also, you must have a plan and break down those plans to simple and small actionable plans to help you to achieve what you set out to do.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I want to pitch the same question to Hamid, and then just to add a twist. So obviously what Yvonne is saying is really great and aligns very well with what we see in the report in terms of saying impact first, right? And for many of us in the space, that's very close to our hearts. So why we are doing it in the first place, and not to be led by funding. But what if funding becomes very tight? I don't know if you have anything to share about what might happen when the funding begins to lead, and if you've had any experience with how one deals with that. If funding is leading you in other directions, perhaps that are not as close to your initial purpose.
Okay, so for me, there will be instances where funding a particular project becomes right, because passion, yes, you might have the passion, you might have the drive, you might have the vision, but getting people to buy into that vision might also be, you know, a challenge at particular times in the civic tech organization. I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking from other people that I've had to converse with in the course of my work. So what then happened is you need to then dig deep to look at people or organizations that align with your vision, who you can sell this dream to and sort of seek collaboration. Collaboration is very key for every work, but there will always be that one person who buys into your vision, and or who even have a source of funding, maybe not directly but indirectly, to what you want to achieve. The person might give you links to who you need to speak to be able to get funding for the projects you want to execute.
Thank you so much. Hamid, same questions to you. What would your experience and advice be?
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to see you, Jesse, and all the people. And yes, it's maybe the last day of Ramadan, so I might be not speaking good English because this is not my, So, when it comes to funding, it takes time and effort, a lot of time and effort, and sometimes it's important to have a clear understanding of your project goal and target, as Yvonne said, an audience, and as well as a strong plan for execution and sustainability. But the last, sustainability sometimes is a bigger problem. So for us, like for child innovation, for our civic tech project we had, like we went first asking the government for grants, even though, it's very difficult for government to give grants and things like that, but it gives you a kind of a paper that will say like you are clear with them. And once you are clear with the government, once the government is supporting you, even a letter, a statement saying like we are supporting this initiative, then you can take this to another kind of funder like UNDP, some NGOs like UN People, some embassies, because I found out that in Chad, most of the funder, it is whether an embassy or whether an NGO or whether it's an international organization, sometimes they don't move without what we call this a statement from the government saying like you are clear with the government, you don't have a problem with them, and then you can act on your civic tech platform. And that's in Chad, most of our funders are from, like international organization. And sometimes it's, and you have to break down your project into small project, small funding, like small grants. And then you can go, this part is going to be the embassy, and this part is going to be UNDP. The other part regarding women can be UNFPA, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's the way, but you have to be very smart and you have to have a clear strategy in order to get, your fund and to be a sustainable thing that will not stop in the middle. That's my say again.
Thank you so much. So this idea that endorsement and I guess reputation, and maybe that's what they're looking for, becomes one of the ways to achieve that. Thank you so much for that, Hamid. Toyin, just to bring you in, so I'm quite keen to hear from you. What are signs of health that you look for as you are thinking, and it's not to put you on the spot just specifically as a funder, but also as a person who's seen a lot of innovators in this space trying to find funding and funding sustainability. What are some of your thoughts?
Awesome, thanks, Geshi. So I will start by speaking to a part of the first question and then link that up with the health of the organization, because that also ties into when you step out to look for funding. Okay, I thought you couldn't hear me. So I think I want to emphasize the importance of clarifying your strategic focus as an organization and defining what impacts, does your civic tech innovation organization seek to achieve, understand the context, also your comparative advantage within the civic tech innovation ecosystem, but also more broadly, because we are increasingly seeing that civic tech, it sits within the broad participation and civic engagement and empowerment ecosystem. And I say that because this clarity is helpful for you then mapping the civic participation or civic empowerment landscape to identify opportunities, stakeholders, the support ecosystem, which includes but is not limited to funder organizations, right? And I think it's best to identify and establish key relationships and networks, as well as funding opportunities that then align with your organization's strategy and specific impact area. In terms of what I look out for, in judging or in assessing the health of an organization, I would say structures, systems and policies that are fit for purpose. So my due diligence would cover first, is this a legal entity? And is this organization compliant with relevant regulations, right? Now that we've established all of that this is a duly registered organization, see, every organization is as healthy as its people. So I know that should go without saying because there are no organizations without people. So I would like to check if there are structures, if there are policies and good practices that make for an enabling environment for the people behind the amazing work that we see out there. I would also be interested in how the organization is reflective of the community they serve and the change that it seeks to effect in that, that society, that community, but also in society more broadly. I'll be interested in their policies and practices around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, right? And this will reflect in the board, the way that the board is constituted, in the leadership of the organization, and in the way staff is set up, and also in the way that the organization shows up in the world in terms of their reputation, across the ecosystem, be it amongst their peers or within the founder ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Toyin. I was just thinking as you were speaking that one of the snippets in the report encourages people to walk the talk. And I think you're saying you would actually be looking for that. And so I think it links well with what both Yvonne and Hamid were also saying, that matters. So it's a package. It's not just funding and a good project proposal. One is looking at a lot more. I don't want to hog too much space because we have a short time. And we will come back briefly to the panel, but we just wanted to have a bit of time, and I've asked the audience to have some nice hot questions ready. So I'm hoping there are things that you want to know, and maybe we can add Gabby to the screen here. And just really wanting to invite the audience either verbally or via chat to pitch up any questions they would like. Here's your opportunity to speak to people who are in the space. We are talking funding, we're talking about innovating funding. I think Gabby is challenging us to also look beyond some of the traditional, purely grant-based models. There's a strong pitch from our panel here to say that a sort of purpose, the strategy matters, the relationships matter, and that's really important. What questions might you have for our panel here? So just opening up the space a little bit. Any questions or comments from audience and participants out there? Thanks, Gabby, for coming on. I'm sure they'll pin you just now. In fact, the panel can ask questions too if they want. I guess no problem with that. Oh, people are so quiet. Is it the end of the day? Maybe it's Ramadan. Hamid might be right. People could just be exhausted. Right. Okay, Shupi, thank you so much. So Shupi Kai Gwabuya, we see your hand up. Please come in.
Thank you for this very insightful and interesting conversation and the research. I think my question goes to something that Gabby carries on referring to. How do we start tapping into non-traditional sources, and what's the appetite for that? And what are some of the limitations? I know it's something that's been highlighted, but just hearing Toyin speak, it would be very interesting on how they steer different institutions that they already provide resourcing for to build collateral that allows them to start harnessing funds through alternative resources.
Thank you so much. So how to, non-traditional sources, holy grail, how to sustain ourselves beyond the usual. Any practical thoughts from any of the panelists on this? Or even examples. Are we seeing any examples in the space of how organizations are, even if it's not yet fully the model or fully sustainable? I think, Gabby, you mentioned earlier that you were looking at, so for example, who's using impact investing or social enterprise models or other models. But are there any either examples or instances any of you can share where we begin to see some promising ideas or signs? Or are we all going to be calling Toyin?
Well, I mean, I'll kick us off. Obviously everybody talks about diversifying funding, but what that means and how you should structure to do that becomes the question. So, there are ways that you can benefit, from the energy and the startup environment, from forms of direct investment. But of course, you can only do that like direct financial investment, like through traditional finance structures, not banks. I mean, but in order to do that, obviously, you have to be able to disseminate profit, so that implicates how you're organized and associated. So people are starting to explore hybrid models where you have a non-profit and for-profit arm as a way of trying to benefit from different kinds of income streams. But of course, that depends on what your central service and product offering categories are, and also what it is you want to do. Whether it's even viable that could work. It does increase the administrative burden of the work you do, and there are a lot of tricky balances, in a kind of hybrid model for trying to determine how you prioritize work. And I think that's typically, one of the key challenges for the organizations that go those routes. And like there are a lot of countries in the region which still have quite don't yet have a very mature, venture capital and financing or impact investing environment. Impact investing, as cool as it sounds, is still quite, not very mature in the region. So yeah, that's some thoughts.
Thanks for that, Gabby. I'm quite keen to hear, maybe Hamid, in your environment, what is the range of options actually, or do you feel in your region there are these alternatives, be it impact investing or government funding or other kinds of funding? What might be the opportunities or challenges to that kind of diversification in your parts?
I can say, sometimes it's very tough, very difficult to get funding when you are you don't speak English, you are in a landlocked country, the internet is penetration is very low, like the people are not very literate, and when you talk about a IT solution to those kind of people, sometimes the funders, sometimes they have their stereotype, they have their own mindset who's ready for a country like Chad, for example. And when you come with an idea and that's, I want to, to develop a civic tech who's going to help this and that, they will say, no, Chad is not ready, and done, they will not give you the chance to explain. And sometimes, you have to, to find ways to come back to them, to convince them and to discuss with them. So one of the major challenges is really, even sometimes when you ask for a lot of money, the belief, it's a too much kind of funding you are asking for, and why not breaking down into, and that's why we came with this kind of strategy of breaking it down to small kind of project that can be carried out with, different kind of funders,
Thank you so much, Hamid. Yvonne, maybe, I don't know if there's any reflection. I know you are in multiple countries, but even if you just commented on where you are, do you see much space, room for this diversification?
Okay, yeah, so I totally agree with Anit, but from our region here, so there are different things that could determine how organization or civic tech innovation source for their funding. One, it could be the size of the organization will determine the kind of organization they will approach for funding. So size matters in terms of like what Tony mentioned, the structure you have put in place will determine the funder that you approach at different time of your organization growth. Also, the credibility of your organization would either attract funders to you based on the impact that they have seen you carry out in previous years, or also if they've seen that the organization is not so credible, it might also drive away funders from you. So you might be doing good work, but because maybe your credibility is on the line while you are doing your work, it might limit the kind of funding that you are getting. Also, I've also seen organizations approach government agencies or even people in government who have particular funds to execute projects, but they don't know how to go about it. There are civic tech organizations that can approach them and sell their idea to them and get funding in terms of like partnership to execute what they set out to do. So there can be partnership between the civic tech organizations and even government agencies in executing impact projects. And also, we could also leverage organization CSRs. There are a lot of organizations that have funds for their CSR, but they really don't know how to begin to implement. So these are different sources that organizations can, leverage at different times of their growth as an organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And I think over time, one of the things we think we might try to do on the platform is actually invite people to share some of these different modalities, or maybe even cases, case studies of some of them. I think we were saying with Gabby, we might even look at which ones work well and which ones don't work so well, because I imagine they all have different dynamics to them. But thank you for both of these inputs. I see a comment on the chat, Tlantla Mabaso, welcome Tlantla, saying that one of the areas that might be good to explore is something like the criminal asset recovery accounts, where funding of anti-corruption work could be sourced based on monies recovered from law enforcement agencies. And this might require some partnerships with government. So I think that's a really neat idea. And I suppose would require people knowing that landscape in their respective countries or regions to see where might there be equivalents. So, where is there an opportunity perhaps to tap into funding streams like that. So thank you for that. Claudia, welcome. Claudia is one of the disadvantaged who can't access the link, but thank you for being here. You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Getty, and thanks everyone. Very interesting discussion, and I think I saw a lot. Yvonne touched on the point that I wanted to make, so maybe just elaborating a little bit more on partnerships. So as I was thinking about what are maybe opportunities that could be utilized more. So, I work at an organization, a large international donor. And I think to reach then into specific countries or to smaller organizations, that is administratively very challenging. And so some of the funding happens through sub-granting. And so, kind of how could organizations come together? I think that could also maybe address some of the very real challenges that you are seeing, Hamid. Being a German living in the American context, there's clearly a preference for kind of English-speaking countries for the most part, and kind of how can some of these challenges and barriers be mitigated? And I think partnerships, across, I think could be one way to go, and just want to highlight a little bit more that aspect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Claudia. Interestingly, somebody on the chat, it's written as Volker, I'm not sure if that's the name, of GM is the name, is actually asking how do we build these networks and partnerships? So I would suggest, unless maybe one of you has a quick comment on that, I want to go to asking the panel their sort of close up question because of time. But does anybody have a comment on this? So how do we build up into those partnering arrangements, these networks we're saying are important. Any tips from anybody on the panel?
Yes, yeah, you know, for funding, you have, you know, to do a research on the funder, like priorities, what they want, what are, you know, that your project will align with the mission and values sometimes. You know, like try to contact their program officers, have a chat with them, attend their events sometimes, you know, like kind of a network to have, you know, an inside view on what you want, you know, and then from that, you know, like gathering and those speaking out with so many part of this organization, you know, and then you can, you know, draft something in accordance with their term and reference, you know.
Thank you so much. And I think that echoes what Toyin was also saying, that you've got to map those ecosystems, you've got to do the research. So that's a very important starting point. Okay, so I want to go around and we thought it might be fun to end with asking all of the panelists to make a declaration now that they have seen this life-changing report that we have put out and are invited to speak on it. And Hamid, since we just stopped with you, maybe we start with you, that if you are a funder, what would you see as an important commitment to what you will now do differently? So Hamid, the funder, now tells us what he will be doing differently as a funder.
As a funder, you know, like sometimes, you know, I look into the project and I listen to the person, you know, what he's saying and what's the impact, you know. And I always, you know, have an example, you know, by, I think there is Ashoka organization, you know, Civic Tech is mostly related to social entrepreneur. Is it the person really a social entrepreneur? You know, sometimes whatever like we are doing as a part-time job or as an organization, it's not our full-time job. And we do that because we have a kind of love to our country, or maybe a way of giving back to our community, or a way of adding like something to our communities. And sometimes maybe we don't know the how, sometimes. And maybe you in front of us know, or maybe if I am the founder, like I'm the representative or I'm the ambassador of a big nation in Chad, I will dig down, I'll do my research on the person, who's the founder, who are the team, who are they, what they do, and things like that. And when I found them, they are really social entrepreneurs, I will help them build this system. And maybe I will not give the funding in 1 shot or 2 shot time. Maybe I will sustain, you know, maybe I'm here for a 5 years, or maybe I'm there for 3-5 years. I will do with them a program of a 5 years. We'll do the follow-up, and until we succeed. And that's, you know, sometimes funders need just numbers. They just need to communicate, you know, hey, we are like supporting 1,000 women of Chad, but they don't do anything. So that's what my way of, if I get, I'm building, I will be a funder soon. When I will be a funder, I will look into people. Thank you.
Excellent. So Hamid is going to be a big funder. He is going to be a sustainable funder, not just sustainable funding. And he will make sure that he supports even those who don't quite know how, but they seem to be trying to do the right things. So thank you, Hamid, for that commitment. Toyin, now you will be a fundee. What are you going to do differently as an innovator who has been seeking funding in this space?
Thank you. Well, first, I have comfort in the fact that the civic tech innovation space has resources, human, finance, etc., and that I can tap into. Secondly, as the leader of an organization contributing to social impact and to big change in this world, I know that shortage of funding is not indicative of the impact that my civic tech innovation or organization is making in the world. And because of that, I'll rest easy and I'll be intentional about clarifying my organizational strategy, and comparative advantage in the civic tech for civic participation and governance space more broadly. And I was strategic also in seeking both cash and non-cash support, because they are both important, to achieving impact or for scaling, depending on where I am per time. And I think I'll stay proud because I'm a part of something big in this world.
Excellent. We're already having a lot of impact with this report. So I'm hearing confidence, I'm hearing pride, I'm hearing being intentional about strategy and the different opportunities. Wonderful. Yvonne, we are going to be knocking you off of the philanthropic seat and telling you to look at other ways to fund yourself. What are you going to be doing differently now?
Okay, so for me, I'll be looking at I'll not just be looking at the regular funders, organizations, foundations who are giving grants. I'll be looking at other ways of raising funds for my charity or my civic tech organization. I'll be seeking partnership, collaboration, and beyond seeking partnership, I have to do due diligence of the person I'm seeking collaboration with to ensure that the funds that are being given to me are legit funds and not from other sources that might implicate the work that I'm doing with my organization. I would also collaborate with smaller organizations, because I discovered there are a lot of big civic tech organizations, but there are a lot of also small organizations that are doing good work, but they don't have the capacity to scale. So I will look at for what do they have that I don't have, and what do they have that they can bring on board to complement the work that I'm doing, and where do they have access to that I do not have access to. So that way we can collaborate and do good work and scale the impact that we intend to achieve. I think that's
wonderful.
it.
Thank you. And I like the point about due diligence. You're not just taking money from anybody. You are quite intentional about where you'll take money. Gabby, what are you going to do now? Now that you've finished doing the research on the report, what are you going to do about your funding?
I feel like I've grown so much. That's the thing. I feel like I'm just a totally renewed person who has so much more insight. No, I mean, I think, but to touch on, I mean, I should constantly do everything I do differently, but that's a personal matter, But I wanted to touch just before we go on the issue of partnerships. And I think that came up because I think there is really lovely, interesting work being done, also as part of that, and anti-work on the non-profit industrial complex, about how organizations can work together better and more collaboratively for funding. Bearing in mind there are a lot of limitations. I think the language limitations are good. I think that it's also on the continent there's some real biases and about what we consider to be good work, and we still have all these huge digital inequalities, digital infrastructure inequalities. And I mean, if you've been in the funding landscape for the last month, you know that there isn't anything being funded except AI for good projects, in spite of the fact that we still lack some fundamental data and digital infrastructure, you know what I mean? So I think we do have to be creative together to push the agenda, the right agenda for the continent forward on what we want to have funded. But I think, we mustn't underestimate how hard partnerships are. That, often you think you're working with like-minded organizations, that makes that work easy, but it's not easy. And I don't want people to undervalue how we have to structure those partnerships very well, organizationally, and in terms of contracts and expectations and processes and stuff. And we have to be very realistic about what each other's incentives are and where there's alignment and where there's not. And, we don't always have to perfectly align. but I think there needs to be a radical honesty in those partnerships to make them productive.
Thank you so much for that to all of you and for playing along in these new roles. I'm joking, we'll not necessarily use them as testimonials, but I still think you are all able to give us some sense of maybe what we hope are some of the takeaways for actors in the space as they receive a report like this. I want to hand over now and, just first of all, thanking the panel. Thank you all so much for taking this time and Gabby, obviously, for supporting this work. Really appreciate it and look forward to continuing this journey with you. I think Amy will take us into the light. We've gone slightly over. We'll be done in a few minutes. So thank you for your patience. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much to our panel. Really interesting discussions happening, and I wish we had more time, but that's okay. Just before we close, I'd like to ask Shubikaya Goguya from Civicus just to give us a few words. We worked really closely with them, and so yeah, Shubi, if you could just give us a few words and then we'll go to closing.
Thank you very much, Amy and Gershi and the panelists. I think it's a real privilege to be part of such a discussion. And as Civic, as we work globally with different, in civic space, supporting advocacy as well as supporting any civic organizations. And an example of how we work is we aren't primarily a grant-making organization, but through the CHARM project, which is basically a consortium on media and civic space in sub-Saharan Africa, focuses on sub-Saharan Africa, and there are other external partners who are part of that. We are able to kind of support organizations or work that supports different networks in different thematic groups under civic space and democracy. So I think Civic Tech graciously gave us the space to work closely with them and understand, try and better understand what the civic tech sector is looking at in terms of resourcing. And because typically we have some work around resourcing, and it's also looking there the issues around resourcing as in grassroots organizations, and having shared this report with my colleagues within the wider organization globally, I think they picked up quite some interesting areas that we will get in touch with Civic Tech in the future. So just in a few words, just to say thank you for this work. And the report is a tool that's not going to be shelved, but that will also help the wider civic community really understand what's taking place in terms of civic tech in sub-Saharan Africa, but also our resourcing team really picked up a few things from the report that they may find useful, and will reach out to Civic Tech directly. So once again, thank you for the privilege of working with you. And I'm looking forward to working you in the future through CHARM or through any other projects within Civicus. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined our launch. We apologize, we've gone a little over time, but really interesting discussions. Please read the report, please interact with the microsite. And also to say, this is just the start. As we said before, this is a product of ongoing discussions and dialogue, and we intend this to continue. So watch this space, watch out for our new additions to the microsite and further work. So thank you so much and enjoy your evening.
Sanibonani nonke emakhaya, igama lami uSiphiwe Moya.
Thank you.
Usukhamba ubhekana nempendulo ngaphandle konke okudingayo kukhona ngaphakathi kwakho ngazukholwe konke ungazukholwe nanamanga enkundleni zokuxhumana uzobezwe bethi bephinde bethi wena uvala amadleve wenze ngathi awuzwanga ngoba ungazukholwe konke ungazukholwe nanamanga It's kinda sad how people think social media is the truth. Ngoba ama-celebrity ngeke aposte emayekhaya ngeke aposte izinhluku. It's kinda sad how we put pressure on ourselves to reach the roof. Thina sasakhohlwa ukuthi sinamuva liyabukwa kuthatha isikhathi ukwakha umuzi brick by brick yekufane nosomezi just by a click ubona abanye ungajahi step by step kuthatha isikhathi ukwakha umuzi brick by brick yekufana noma ihlala just by a click ubona abanye ungajahi step by step usukuhamba ubhekana nempendulo ngaphandle konke okudingayo kukhona ngaphakathi kwakho ngaze ukholwe konke ngaze ukholwe nanamanga enkundleni zokuxhumana uzobese bethi bephinde bethi uvala amadlebe wenze ngathi awuzwanga ngoba ungaze ukholwe konke ngaze ukholwe nanamanga enkundleni zokuxhumana iqiniso lithi I don't wanna be a victim umuntu athatha impilo yakhe ngenxa ze-algorithm iqiniso lithi I don't wanna be a victim for the likes, for the followers, double tapping, got us forgetting the vision iqiniso lithi I don't wanna be a victim umuntu athatha impilo yakhe ngenxa ze-algorithm iqiniso lithi I don't wanna be a victim for the likes, for the followers, double tapping, got us forgetting the vision. Double tapping, got us forgetting the vision. Double tapping, got us forgetting the vision. Double tapping.